The Detroit Lions drafting of Tyleik Williams in the first round of the 2025 draft class struck many people as one of the largest surprises of the night. A player that wasn't going to impact their pass rush directly, wasn't going to improve their edge rushing depth or quality, and a player that just didn't seem to fit what the Detroit Lions needed after being talked about all offseason as an edge rusher. People had their hearts set on Mike Green, Jahad Campbell, James Pearson, several other young quality pass rushers in the draft. And when it was not only not an edge rusher, but not even a pass rusher, many Detroit Lions fans and many NFL analysts felt like it was a big miss by Brad Holmes and the Lions. They graded Tyleik Williams as one of the worst picks on night one of the NFL draft, and to this day, even months removed, still look at it as a major whiff in the first round, despite Tyleik never having taken a snap of professional football as of today. Now, despite that being the case, Tyleik Williams has already begun to impress his teammates and his coaches through voluntary workouts and team meetings. Although he hasn't been able to see the field a ton as of recently, in the classroom and in the meeting room, he has been a star standout draft pick, and he's impressed not only his coaches, but multiple teammates, including Aiden Hutchinson and DJ Reader, who have spoken on Tyleik Williams' behalf. The 6'3", 330-pound run stopper from Ohio State had a fantastic career with the Buckeyes, seeing team success, individual success, and eventually being drafted as a first-round selection on draft night. Now, many people believed that Tyleik Williams was more of a second-round pick. They believed he was more of a player that was going to go on the early day two, maybe even middle of day two, and some people believed as far that the Detroit Lions could have got Tyleik Williams at 60 instead of drafting him at 28th overall. That was far from true. The Buffalo Bills came out a couple days later and said, no, we would have drafted Tyleik Williams at 30 if the Lions had not done so at 28. And yet still many people believed that Williams was not worth the draft capital. In his time at Ohio State, Tyleik Williams played in 51 games for the Buckeyes, where he totaled 136 tackles, 28 TFLs, 11.5 sacks, 10 passes defended, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. Now, it wasn't just individual success that Tyleik Williams saw. Under his guidance and under his leadership, the Ohio State Buckeyes saw a ton of team success as well. Over his 4 years at Ohio State, the Buckeyes went 47-8 with 47 wins and 8 losses. They appeared 3 different times in the college football playoffs in those 4 years. They won the Rose Bowl twice, they won the Cotton Bowl, and of course, most recently, they won the 2025 College Football Playoff National Championship. Now, team success is not inherently linked to individual success. There are a lot of starters and even a lot of good players on national championship caliber teams that never work out in the NFL. And if QB stats aren't a win, defensive tackle wins are certainly not a stat. But coming from that winning culture, coming from a winning program, and coming from a place where the expectation is a championship could be a really good thing for prospects going into the NFL. That's why Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Penn State, and all of these big time programs continue to put out prospects and players and champions. It's because the expectation in college is to win a national championship every single year. It's to make the college football playoff every single year. And that expectation is something that sticks with players. Players that go from Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, they come to the NFL expecting to win championships. And that is a good mindset to have. That culture coming over from the college football game can have a positive impact in the NFL. So while wins may not necessarily translate directly, that winning culture most certainly does. Taking a look at his scouting report, there was a lot of good things to say. His pro comp was Alim McNeill, a player that as of recently became one of the highest paid players at his position after being one of the best defensive tackles in football over the past 4 years. He was graded as one of the best pure run stoppers in the class. He's explosive and violent with good foot quickness. He's a team first player and has really good integrity with his gap assignments and really whatever he's asked to do. If you want him to set the edge, he'll set the edge. If you want him to stack and shed, he'll stack and shed. If you want to take away any gap on the offensive line, he's going to do so and do it at a very high and very professional level. And he's a player that when we talked about him being drafted wasn't the flashy guy. He wasn't going to get 100 tackles for loss. He wasn't going to, slice through the offensive line for a big TFL or a massive sack, but he's one of those players that kind of fades into the background. He does his job very well. It does his job at an incredibly high level. And even if the announcer is only going to call his name 2 to 3 times a game, he's going to be so important on this defensive line that if you go back and watch any game from, the broadcast angle, you go back and watch any game the Detroit Lions play next year, Tyleik Williams is going to be in the middle of things. He's going to be directing the run game. He's going to be impacting the defensive line. And even if he doesn't get the sack, even if he doesn't get the TFL, even if he doesn't make the flashy tackle in the backfield, he's going to limit some of those potential big plays. He's going to make sure that the 2, the 1, the 0-yard rushes stay that way. He's going to make sure that they don't explode into 10, 15, 20-yard rushes. And those aren't plays that typically show up on a highlight reel. Just doing your job, shedding your block, hitting the right gap isn't something that's going to show up on a highlight reel. It's not going to show up when people talk about Tyleik Williams outside of an NFL organization, but it's going to be talked about a lot in the organization, because that's what Tyleik Williams is. He's a team first player. He's a great assignment integrity type of guy. And even if he isn't a flashy player, he is one of the most technically sound and refined players in the class when it comes to just simply doing his job. Now, he's not a perfect player. If he was a perfect player, he wouldn't have been the 5th defensive tackle off the board. He does have inconsistent pad level at times, does have some shorter arms and lacks length. But again, those aren't really things that impacted him at Ohio State. They aren't things that necessarily hurt his game or prevented him from being an impactful playmaker. Now, going to the Lions defense, right? Because obviously Alim McNeill and the rest of the defensive line had an impact a season ago, but why did the Lions feel to go defensive tackle as opposed to an edge rusher? Well, firstly, the value, but mostly it's because the Lions run defense last year wasn't very good. They faced the fewest rushes of any NFL defense in the league last year. They were 4th in pressures and 4th in QB knockdowns, meaning their pass rush, despite being 23rd in sacks, really wasn't that poor. They were a good team at getting to the quarterback. They just weren't a very good team at finishing. They were 5th in rushing yards allowed, which might make you think that they were quite good at defending the run, when in fact they ranked 22nd in rushing touchdowns allowed and 20th in rushing yards per attempt allowed. They were not a very good football team when it came to stopping the run. They just happened to be lucky enough and in a situation where they didn't have to stop the run very often. But when they did, when teams got up on them early, teams like the Texans with Joe Milton, teams like the Texans with Joe Mixon, teams like the Seahawks with Kenneth Walker, teams like the Buffalo Bills with James Cook, the Packers with Josh Jacobs, all of those teams rushed on the Detroit Lions fairly effortlessly, especially in the back half of the year. And the Lions, for the most part, were pretty helpless to stop it. So you bring in a player like Tyleik Williams, who's going to shore up the run defense, is going to help with the pass rush, had 11.5 sacks at defensive tackle over his 4 years, was more productive as a player than even guys like Jalen Carter coming out of the class when he was selected. Tyleik Williams is a good football player. He's a good NFL caliber defensive tackle, and he's going to impact the game early, and he's going to impact the game often. Now, for the title of this video, how is he impressing teams? How has he been impressing his Detroit Lions teammates and coaches without actually being on the field? Because during minicamp and during rookie minicamp in particular, he was very limited. He worked on the sidelines with trainers, didn't do a whole lot of team drills. He did walkthroughs and did a lot of meeting stuff, but didn't do a whole lot physically for the Detroit Lions in that time. His presence and really his impressive nature came in the classroom. It came in the meeting rooms, in his positional meetings, in his defensive meetings, talking with the defensive coordinator, talking with newly appointed defensive line coach Casey Rogers. It came from his ability to perceive the game, adapt quickly, and really apply concepts that are pretty complicated for rookies coming out of the draft. Alim McNeill and DJ Reader have said so themselves. Aiden Hutchinson said it as well, that he's just a very quick learner. He's a guy that isn't always the loudest, isn't always the most outspoken, isn't always the guy jumping up and down to answer the questions, but he's a guy that always knows the answer. He's a player that if he ever gets called upon, if he ever gets asked what to do in the situation, he knows what to do. He knows that assignment. Having that prepared as a rookie, especially on a defensive line like the Detroit Lions with so much rotation and doing a lot of complicated things on the line, it's really impressive to see. DJ Reader had a quote the other day versus the media, and he said, "The sky's the limit. He's a good kid, and he's pretty smart. He sits beside me in meetings, so it's just cool to hear his answers. He doesn't always talk loud, but he knows the answer to every question." That is DJ Reader, the Detroit Lions star nose tackle from a season ago. So even if he's not being the biggest impact player on the field, even if he hasn't really shown that on the football field in pads and with a helmet yet, he is still making strides. He is still impressing coaches. He is still impressing his teammates. Aiden Hutchinson has said very similar things. Alim McNeill has said very similar things. Casey Rogers has had a lot of positive things to say about the kid. And even though he hasn't played yet, even though there's still a lot left to prove, this is a really good sign for the Detroit Lions. This is a really good thing to be hearing about your rookie defensive tackle, that they're smart, they're applying concepts, that they're learning and adapting very quickly to the NFL game. And now it's just a matter of putting it on the field. And that is something that I have absolutely no concern that Tyleik Williams will be able to do. He signed his rookie contract a few days ago, so that was pretty big for him. And now he's just waiting for minicamp. He's waiting for training camp, and he's ready to hit the field as a Detroit Lion. But with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on not only what we're hearing out of the Detroit Lions organization right now, but let me know what you think of the pick. Has your opinion changed since draft night? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it worse? I'd love to hear you guys' opinions and expectations for Tyleik next year. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.